First thing we need to do is to draw our grid. Now you would have had some experience with creating sprites and drawing custom shapes before, but basically what we need to do is create a new function which will allow us to set up our grid. It's going to receive a parameter of the grid size, and this will allow us, when we call our function in setup grid, to dictate how big that's going to be. Now for our shape, I don't want to have the outside of my grid showing. I just want it to be sort of like a hashtag sort of thing. So let's start off. We're going to create a new path. Okay, and then because I don't want that outside shape, I'm going to make my grid size -1. This will stop my outside walls being drawn. Okay, my height and my width I'm going to dictate based on the view. So let's go view bounds height, so we can find how big our view is. I'm going to create a little buffer on this. So first of all, let's change this to an integer. Okay, and then I want to do -20. That will give me a little bit of a buffer in from the edge. And with the height as well, I'm going to divide it by 2 because I only want the screen to be half a screen like you saw in the demo. Okay, so now I've got my height. My width will be very similar. Don't worry about those yellow highlights. Those are just telling me that I haven't used them yet, but I've created them. Okay, and we're going to let size equal the width divided by the grid size. Okay, so then we're going to start looping around and drawing. We're going to need to draw each line at a time. So this is going to be us drawing the columns. Okay, so we're going to start with the size. So for 1 columns, we're going to get our path. We're going to move to a position on our screen. Then we're going to add a line. And then we're going to increment our start to increase the size. Okay, so this will just move it across the screen as we're going along. Okay, we need to do the same thing when we draw the rows as well. So our start, let's reset this to equal the height divided by the grid size. I'm using that underscore because I'm not using the increment. We're doing the exact same thing as before, so path, move to the position. If you don't use that move to, then it will draw a line between them, so we don't want to do that. You might notice that these commands are very similar to the commands which are used in my geometry course, and that's because the geometry course is actually using the exact same paths that you're using here, so the commands are very similar. So hopefully you're seeing some similarity between the work that you've done beforehand. And then we're going to increment this start. Cool. And then finally, we're going to close that path. Okay, so we have our completed path that's been made. Oops, just missing a space up top there. Okay, we have this path that's been made, but paths can't be displayed inside views, so we need to create this into a shape layer. So create a shape. And these shape layers can then be added to the view. So shape layer equals CA shape layer dot path. Okay, Okay, we want to use our path that we created before. So this path that we created here, we're just going to convert this to a CG path that just wants it to be a certain type, ready for it to be displayed. Now we get to decide what we want it to look like. So we could add additional parameters at the top, which would allow us to change the colors. If you want to do that, if it's something you're going to reuse all the time, that would be very useful. Change the fill color. This isn't really used for this current one because we're not filling any shapes. So we could make it clear or just make it white. Of course, the line width. Again, you can make this thicker if you want to make it thicker. And then finally, what's the position that we want it to sit in? And we'll use CG point again. We'll just make it sit a little bit in from the edge. Okay, so I've got my shape layer now. The last thing I need to do is to add this to my view. So find my view, layer, add sub layer, and then add my shape layer. Okay, I've got a little bit of an error here on my stroke color. I'm not too sure what that is. Let's have a look. Let's try and type it again. Dot stroke color. Yep, it definitely has a stroke color. We want to make it UI color dot white. Yep, they all exist. CG color. Okay, I'm not sure why that was having a little sad on us, but seems to be working now. Okay, so let me choose my iPhone 8. I like making it on the iPhone 8. You would have noticed from my other tutorials because it still has a home button, so it makes it a bit easier if I need to navigate back to the home screen. It's a bit easier than trying to swipe with the keypad. Okay, so far we have our nice grid. We've made this nice and dynamic as well. So if I wanted to change this to 5x5 grid, for example, if you're going to make battleships or something like that, we can then change this. I'll change to a 5x5 grid. The other thing I'll show you is just how to get rid of this. This is there by default, that hello world. It's just inside your game scene. Select it, delete it. Okay, and that's it. We now have a nice grid which we can use for our tic-tac-toe.